I'm Chip Pellade. I'm the Jeanne Project Director, and hello to everyone who I haven't met yet. I very much look forward to meeting you. And this last session is on the barriers and challenges. I think all of us understand that this is something new that we're trying to do here. You know, we can figure it out, but we're going to have to figure out what are the hard parts, how we're going to tackle them, how we're going to work together to do this. The first part of this is going to be Glenn Reichert. And Glenn is going to introduce the Ignite effort. And then we're going to go into a panel session, and I hope you know if you're in the panel. So when Glenn is done around 10:45, please, the panelists, come down here, and we'll start the panel session. Without further ado, Glenn.
Thanks very much, Chip. When I think about the barriers and opportunities for USIgnite, I think in some sense, our biggest barrier is not dreaming enough, is not thinking enough about what we can possibly do. The tagline for USIgnite is America's network for next-gen applications. Not today's applications, not what you could do right now, not what you could do with today's internet, but what you could do with tomorrow's internet, the future internet. So almost by definition, a USIgnite app is one that you couldn't write or do today. It's something that's going to require some new stuff. What does that new stuff look like? Well, I've got some ideas, and I'd like to share them with you about what a next-gen application, a next-gen network might look like. And you might have other ideas and might be able to extend this in other directions. But just to get you thinking about what some of the interesting things are that we might be able to do. Ignite apps really can be different from today's apps, and I'm going to talk about 6 different ways in which they could be different. There might be some other ways again, but we've heard a lot about being at least 100 megabits per second, maybe gigabit, and low latency. I'll talk some more about each of these points. We really think about the fact that TCP/IP is broken at a gigabit speed. If anyone needs any help with that, I can talk to you in the break or talk to folks in your computer science department. So we have to do something different. And that something different is probably going to be built on layer 2 of the network. So what do those things mean, and how does OpenFlow affect that? Third, the National Science Foundation has funded some very interesting things. OpenFlow is one of them, but another one is a set of capabilities that I'm calling Jeanne capabilities because they've been developed under this Global Environment for Networked Innovation program. And some of these are very interesting. They've been long predicted. So for example, when I was at DARPA, I convened a blue ribbon panel, and we had Deb Estrin and Butler Lamston and lots of folks, and said, what will the networks of the future look like? And they said, each application will probably have its own network. And in fact, Jeanne has taken this to the level where each application can be matched up with a virtual network that matches it. So I'll talk a little bit about that. For latency reasons, you'd like to have local compute and storage, sort of local cloud computing. I'll talk a little bit about that. I think one of the very interesting possibilities for everyone in this room is to think about resources that you might have, a satellite feed, information on time of day electricity usage, data on trips to the bathroom in the middle of the night. We really needed a break after that last talk there. We have all kinds of data and facilities that can be made available. I think those will help trigger some of the next generation applications. Wireless and mobile. We've seen a huge explosion in wireless and mobile computing. What does that mean for us? And finally, if we're going to create a new generation of applications, you'd like them to be open and extendable so we can build one upon the other. We'd like to take what you've done and build on it and have someone else build on that. So we'd like to think about applications that have a platform. What should that platform be? Very open. Let's talk about what that platform could be. Maybe you'd like to build a platform for creating Ignite applications. And building on that platform, what are the things that will really add to something that's already there and allow other people to add to that so that we can have 1,000 applications in the Ignite application bazaar I can't say the Ignite app shop because doesn't Apple have some copyright on App Store or something? So I'm taking App Bazaar. That's the one that I'm choosing. So let me talk a little bit about these. First, 100 megabits per second in low latency. I think that Lev and his team showed us last night what you can do with 100 megabits per second plus in low latency. High quality, real-time, uncompressed video. And you saw some magic things happen, right? I saw some magic things happen, and I'm sure that you did too. So telemedicine, including telesurgery, visualization. Virtual meetings. I'd like to go to my city council meeting without having to go and find a parking place near City Hall. I'd like to be able to go to my Alcoholics Anonymous meeting without having to leave my home if I can do that in a virtual way. And of course, the kind of collaborative music and dance you saw was just outstanding last night. And the performers, I talked to the dancers afterwards, and they were really working with each other, even though they were over the distance. And when you take a look at how symmetric their moves were last night, and you remember that, they really were working together in a very interesting way that we just haven't seen before, I haven't seen before. So I think that was really very inspiring. There's also other things that can be done. In addition to working with reality on the other side, you can work with simulations on the other side. So you can work to be in a simulated environment. On the right-hand side here, you can see an astronaut simulating in a water tank. On the left-hand side, this is from Cal IT2. Some people looking inside some alpha structures inside a protein. These real-time simulations and being able to work with them is something that we'd be able to do for an Ignite application. We can create team or collaborative applications where people are all working together in a team to create something. You see that today in gaming, things like Xbox Live. There's no reason that same kinds of technology couldn't be put together to solve real-world problems that no one person can solve. We've had some excellent presentations yesterday and today about some of the issues and problems that you're solving using some of these technologies. Some of these solutions are going to be multi-person problems that are going to draw on different skill sets, that put them together in different ways. And I think being able to bring those together, those models together, may require very high bandwidth and low latency. Low latency so you feel like you're really working with somebody and you don't end up with some of these awkward delays that you have sometimes in video conferencing where you go and two people speak at the same time because the responses are delayed. If I'm a learner and I'm trying to work in a simulated classroom environment, I don't want one view of the instructor. I want to be able to have simultaneous views of the instructor, of the whiteboard, or of the presentation, of the classroom, so I can see if other people look as lost as I feel, and the notes. Maybe there's a designated note taker, or maybe there's a syllabus for the class. I'd like to see all of these simultaneously so that I can become the most effective learner that I can. And to do all of those at the same time simultaneously, I think is probably a very interesting use of high bandwidth and low latency. The second thing I wanted to talk about was the use of layer 2 for post-IP protocols. TCP/IP really is broken at gigabit speeds. Slow start is a non-starter. Once you get beyond about 30 hops, TCP can no longer figure out whether congestion is due to buffer bloat or something else. It's just broken. We need to do some different things. There are some new protocols out there. But the interesting thing is that in Ignite, not only should we be able to think layer 2, we should be able to think layer 2 with the protocol that you need. It could be one of these new flow-based protocols. It could be an application-based protocol that you create for your application. How much more could you do if you had your own protocol that did exactly what your application needs, rather than having to map that application to TCP/IP? Maybe you could do some really interesting things. That would be a next generation application. We already have some extensive experience in research and education networks. When I was with NLR, by far the vast majority of all the traffic on NLR is layer 2 already. So I'm sure that this is the case already on campuses. We need to extend that knowledge to cities and other applications. At layer 2, we can also get much better control over routing and optimization. And one of those advantages over routing and optimization is what's been done with OpenFlow. Again, OpenFlow was developed as part of the Jeanne project funded by the National Science Foundation. Here's just one example that I think you also heard a little bit about earlier this morning. In this particular picture, a golf cart is driving around a building in Stanford and is connected to 3 different access points at the same time. And so instead of having any kind of a breakup in the video coming from or going to this golf cart, you have very continuous flows because it's being sent simultaneously over 3 different paths. Not something you can do on today's TCP/IP networks. The packets only go on one path. They don't go on 3 paths simultaneously and dynamically according to where you are and how you're moving. So here's something that OpenFlow can do that we haven't seen before and can lead to new kinds of applications. Here's another example of something that was demonstrated at one of the Jeanne engineering conferences recently on how OpenFlow can go and take different types of traffic and send it different ways on the network. So you can see here that if you may have a path that is less congested, you'll send the packets that have to get there right away over that path. Other packets that can take longer to get where they need to go can go over a different path, and they can both be optimized. Customized virtual network slices can match each application. Imagine being able to say for your application, I want my network to, well, let's take for video, for watching this webcast, you would say, I want low latency, throw away the packet immediately if you can't send it, don't buffer it, we don't want it late, we just want it not at all, and do that with a consistent data rate. You would have a customized network for video conferencing. On the other hand, if my machine is backing up the photos I took last night, in that case, I don't care if it gets there in real time. Go ahead and buffer like crazy. Go stick them in wherever they can be stuck in. I don't need a constant data rate. That's a different kind of custom network. And I bet your application could use yet another kind of custom network. So customized network slices can match each application, where the application can request specific network properties, specific resources, and it can be programmable by you through OpenFlow or through some of the local resources. Programmable local compute and storage. We are at this point anticipating that participating cities, regional networks, and backbones will have what are being called Jeanne racks, because they come from the Jeanne program, which have programmable compute and storage resources. What could you do if you had those local resources? In some of the examples we saw yesterday where we have disaster planning, you wouldn't have to go to a central database. You could keep all the stuff for your city local. So even if there was a disruption in your ability to connect to a cloud central computer in Illinois, that you could still operate locally. Think about the kinds of applications that you can do if you have programmable local storage, programmable local compute power. You'll be able to do that through these Jeanne racks. It'll also provide for OpenFlow switching and for very dynamic network instrumentation and measurement. We're looking for every participant in Ignite to contribute some resources. You've got something that other folks would like to have access to. Campuses, you're rich with them. Compute clusters, storage clusters, satellite imagery, telescopes, ocean sensors. Your folks have interesting data that secondary analysis would really help to go in and leverage. Cities, you probably have real-time and stored data, traffic data, police data, power consumption. Whatever it is, you probably have some very interesting things you could share and you could make a difference with. Federal agencies have a lot of real-time and stored data and experimental facilities that I think will also be very important to this next generation of applications. Wireless and mobile. I think that we've seen an explosion in mobile apps, tablet apps, sensor networks, continuous health monitoring. In case you were interested, this is the underwear you can wear and does wireless remote transmission of what's going on in your body at any given time. How about some remote eyes? How about some continuous child monitoring? We've lost some kids in some of the flooding in the runoff in Utah here recently. So maybe we could go and better track what's happening with those kids. There are interesting things that could happen here that could be interesting next generation applications. And finally, built to be open, shared, and extendable. Again, we're looking for some platforms that make it easy to do the right thing. Easy to use some of these 6 extensions or others that you can think of to today's network. We want as many apps as possible that should be open and extendable by others, and eventually to have this application bazaar. And I encourage you to reserve your space now in the bazaar so that you have the most traffic of people going by your application. So Ignite apps can be different in these 6 ways, and maybe some others. I'd like to entertain a few questions. Yes, sir.
What do you think about applications? I mean, we talk about USIgnite, and when we start, I guess when Jeanne got started, it was a US-centric kind of activity. But a lot of these things have interesting international interactions too. What do you see as some of the potential for something like this with international collaboration?
I think there are a lot of countries that have interest. I guess I should stand here for the webcast. I'm sorry. I like to move around, but I shouldn't. There are a lot of countries that have interest in helping to boost their economies and achieve other purposes through advanced networking. So we definitely have other folks in Korea, Singapore, Germany, India, other places that are very interested in having these kinds of applications work there also. They may not have exactly the same goals that we have, but I think that there is a great opportunity for collaboration, cooperation, and sharing ideas between countries on what's happening. So I think international is going to be really a very interesting part of how all this works out.
So a naive question from a non-technologist, but my interest is in trying to see how anchor institutions can be useful in delivering these technologies to the general public, the wonderful new next generation stuff. And my question is, do the schools and libraries then need to implement GE technology in order to be able to distribute these innovations to the general public?
Well, we will see how many of the apps need which of these various characteristics or others. And to the extent that an application does use some of these advanced characteristics, then indeed we'll need to make sure that the people who are consuming them can do so effectively. And certainly, for folks who don't know, John Windhausen is one of the folks coordinating the Schools, Healthcare, and Libraries Broadband Coalition, and very interested in the community anchor institutions and how they can be served. And I think that a lot of them are going to be served through USIGNite. USIGNite is going to be done through Internet 2. They have a very strong ability to do a lot of these things already in various parts of their network. The regional networks also have a significant opportunity and capability of doing things like high bandwidth, number 1, number 2, when they become Ignite enabled and Jeanne enabled, number 3. Contributed resources, I think, is a particularly interesting place for the community anchor institutions because they may indeed be interesting sources as well as consumers of how this goes. That would be number 4. Wireless and mobile, a number of the community anchor institutions, some people think of as being fixed, but I think you would agree with me that many of the consumers are mobile and wireless. And I think the community anchors are also very interested in being open, shared, and extendable. So to me, this seems to fit fairly well. It's certainly something that the folks working in Ignite talk about on a regular basis, is how to make sure we have the broadest participation possible. Other questions? I have time for maybe one more. Yes, sir.
Yeah, Glenn, you made an example of a city head-end. Can you give me an example of how the city would work with this organization and make use of the head-end?
How would the city make use of the head-end? Well, I'm assuming that we're talking about the head-end for the city networks. So, for example, in Chattanooga or Lafayette. And what we're expecting would happen there is we would put in these Jeanne racks, which would allow us to have that kind of capability that you see here for numbers 1, 2, 3, and that by being able to do those numbers 1, 2, 3 in that city, we would connect it to a backbone, which was also layer 2, OpenFlow, and Jeanne enabled. So we'd be able to take that application through to campuses who were similarly enabled. So we're expecting that cities will be full partners and do all of these things. Well, thank you very much. I think it's time for the panel session.
Thank you, Glenn. Can I invite the panelists to come down and seat yourselves in front of a microphone here?
Morning, Ivy.
Hello.
Hi, John Kinsey. Good to see you.
Nice to see
Do
you
we have
again.
assigned seats or anywhere?
I think you
Yeah,
can
that's
sit
mine. What are you
exactly
doing?
You're welcome to it.
Let me introduce myself. I'm Chip Elliott.
Oh, hey, Chip. John Kinsey. How are you doing, sir? Great to see you.
All right, for the next half hour or so, we'd love to have a discussion between the room and the panel on the challenges and barriers to how we're going to get there in the next few months and then in the next year. And hopefully it's not all challenges and barriers. I think people here have some fantastic ideas. To me, the great pleasures of the Jeanne project is discovering the real live wires around the United States. And there is an incredible collection of people in this room that are very, very entrepreneurial. So I hope we can be honest in identifying what are these challenges and barriers, but then, so how are we going to tackle them? So without further ado, I will ask, perhaps we should start with the cities, and if you could just talk for a few minutes, 5 minutes.
Okay. My name is John Kinsey from Chattanooga, Tennessee. And I think I'd like to take a couple of minutes just to put in perspective where Chattanooga is at this point and how we got to where we are. As recently as 1985, Chattanooga was considered really one of the worst cities in America. We actually, at one point, were called the dirtiest city in America. So we've had a good bit of history of having to work together with public and private partnerships. We now, in only 25 years, have been able to have our downtown is one of the most remarkable in America now. We have a very special situation because we have just completed, it was announced last September, a Gigabit capability in our 600 square mile area. Costs $300 million, and we have gotten all of our political leadership on board and excited about it. We have had significant accomplishments economic development-wise, HomeServe, Amazon, and they have located in Chattanooga because of our broadband network. So all of our political leadership is on board. They're all excited, but yet we still have significant challenges. Amazon has a facility that is under construction located in an adjoining county, and they cannot tie into our network. Our state legislature will not give us approval for that. So there are still a great many challenges. How do we tie in and pay for usage outside our system with the Jeanne network? That is certainly going to be something that we're going to have to work through. How do we educate our stakeholders in our city to the possibilities and also ensure that all our citizens realize the benefits of this network? And, you know, some of the, what was enabled us to pay for our system was the smart grid. We have not really talked much about energy applications. We are going to be getting billions of readings a year through, within a year, every home business in our area will have a smart meter. So we will be getting billions of readings. What do we do with those? We need your help. We've got our playground set. we need people to come play there.
Thank you very much. I personally find Chattanooga inspirational. I think this kind of can-do attitude and what you in Chattanooga have accomplished is truly remarkable. Shuman.
Okay. So I think that there are quite a few interesting issues that have cropped up in just my experience. So I'll just speak from that on how I see some of the barriers and challenges we need to address. As we are trying to build applications and systems that sort of go out in a larger scale and actually potentially support real users using things in a day-to-day basis, obviously we need to think of designing systems not just for our experimental use, but things that will be stable, things that will not fail frequently. And managing such a system, usually I think it's very hard for just doing it within the context of, let's say, universities and things like that. So it really needs, I think, a way to make this kind of activity self-sustaining. I've seen lots of projects in different parts of the world where these research projects really have tried to gone into communities. They've done a fascinating job. They've deployed their systems. There are lots of users, but then after 3 years, it becomes hard to kind of make it self-sustaining. So you have to have, I think we have to find a way to make this sort of viable for the community to support it. And without that, I think after maybe funding runs out or something else happens, there is nobody who's going to take ownership of kind of maintaining the system or kind of operating it. So I think that's one of the things that we really need to think about as we kind of build these larger scale systems. The second thing I feel is that we need definitely strong buy-in from the government and also from the local industry, because I think in some cases, as we discussed yesterday a little bit, local incumbents might feel threatened and may therefore create barriers to doing certain things differently. I think one of the greatest examples was what happened with the citywide, or at least the Wi-Fi networks in Philadelphia. Some of those issues I think definitely came up, and so we need them to both be involved with this process and be comfortable with the way we are approaching things and make them a party to this discussion. And then I guess we believe we have an infrastructure, we have some initial applications. We need to sort of bring in the users. And one of the things that I've tried to do, there's always, and Jeanne is a perfect example of this, where we are trying to do experimental work, but at the same time support real users. And in some sense, they don't really go well together, because any experimental system that breaks many times will drive away the users, right? So what do you do about that? And how do you make sure that users can stay with you even though you are sort of doing some experiments? And that needs some sort of innovative thinking about how the experimental testbed should be. There's some things we are trying to do where, because in this very specific case where we are designing a system which connects to multiple networks, we can imagine that maybe one of the networks is experimental and the remaining is sort of non-experimental. So as soon as your experiment fails, all your traffic moves to the non-experimental part, and so you can kind of make things more robust. But being able to attract users is the first step, but being able to retain users is even harder. And a few times they don't see good performance. A lot of people say this is not worth my time trying to try again, and that's really something that we should all keep in mind. So these are the things I feel are something we should do.
So on the Jeanne network side, we already were engaging in a prototype program with researchers and doing some early prototype deployments of systems like OpenFlow. And the USIgnite opportunity really gives us the chance to do what we had in mind anyway, which was transition from prototype to production, but gives us the chance to bring in real users and real communities and research applications from elsewhere besides networking. So the great thing about being able to be here with you and talk to you all about the ideas you have and the things you want to try is, that us networking people are finally getting out of looking into our own belly buttons. And everybody has a tendency to, you know, only talk to the people that work in their area. And I think what I'd like to make sure that Jeanne is offering to everybody in this room is the chance to say, hey, I need this network piece, I need this team of people working, I have this bunch of really motivated early users who understand what it's like to be on an experimental system and are willing to sign up for that because they see something great coming in the future. And we're happy to play the matchmaking and exploration role for that because you know, that's core to what we're trying to do as a network. So, so that, you know, any questions or any follow-up on those kinds of things of how do I put together teams or how do I make sure that I have the right pieces of an end-to-end solution, we're happy to help with. The other thing that I think is a challenge, but an interesting challenge, you know, sort of overlaps with what Suman is saying and probably with what you're experiencing in Chattanooga too, which is whenever you're trying to do something as a first cut of a service, but also involve the users and get the users excited about it, you're on a tightrope. That tightrope is kind of inherent to what we're doing here. But as a result, we may come up with some new tools for managing networks or new tools for coordinating how the networks behave with the applications. And those are going to be you know, much broader and more wide-reaching innovations than even the fantastic things that we're talking about doing here, just, you know, with health applications or with public safety. So those are the things that are most exciting. And the barriers are all small compared to that. You know, I think the engineering teams that I've met are fantastic. The researchers are great. We can pretty much figure out how to get around or solve almost any technical problem there is. But we've got to be committed and stick with it for, you know, 2 or 3 years to get it into the hands of those people who can really make a difference and do new things with it.
Well, thank you, Heidi. So I think we heard a pretty good sweep of challenges and barriers. I'll try to lay them out as I heard them. They range from connecting these very interesting islands, right? We've got some fantastically good islands right now. How can we connect them? How can we create the partnerships that we're going to need to do this? Because this is very typical in all things like this, is you can't do it yourself. You've got to somehow figure out how to talk to people who are really quite different from you and make it all work. Because networks already exist, we do have the problem that there are local incumbents. They may get angry if we start doing things, right? So how do we arrange things in such a way so that if possible we engage local incumbents rather than alienate them? How do we bring in users and then retain users as we're building these experimental systems? And then finally, how do we make it self-sustaining? I don't think we have to tackle the self-sustaining right now, right? We're a few steps earlier than that, but that certainly is the end game, right? We have to get to the point where things are self-sustaining. With that, I'd like to open it up to people who have their own comments or their own questions to the panel.
It's this issue about, you know, if you're going to do something for the public and it has to be reliable is interesting. It sort of presents a sort of a choice if you're thinking of a project about whether you try to do something directly with the public or indirectly but yet benefits them. So something like, you know, better surveillance or whatever might, you know, benefit people by lowering crime rates in the parks, but they're not actively, they're passively interacting with it, not actively. Or something that, you know, in my case, improves traffic flow or reduces emissions, they're not directly touching it, they're benefiting of it. Now, I mean, the benefit on one side is you're not trying to service, you know, thousands or tens of thousands of people. The downside is that they may be less aware of the benefit they're receiving from it.
Right.
It's not really a question, it's just kind of an observation.
I believe many of the things people have discussed in this room fall into that category, ranging from your work with the traffic through the electrical metering and so forth, where you could begin with a relatively small group of people who can understand that it's going to be shaky in the early days and then expand outwards. Do other people have comments on this?
Well, I think the smart grid and the electrical is a real opportunity where everybody can realize how they can save money. Because you know, in our case, we are going to have 170,000 smart meters that are connected, and we'll be able to, through as soon as somebody writes us the right application, although we have started doing some work with Bell Labs on that, where we'll be able to show people every month, or actually every day, how much money they have saved by doing their dishes at night instead of during the day. So I mean, that's one of the, that is one area I think where we can reach out and show people immediately.
Very
without
tangible. Todd?
Well, Chattanooga is a good program. We are concerned about smart meters, collecting data, and educating. And I think the concern is that the sensors are too expensive to deploy widely and actually low balance. So what if these technologies are available today? I mean, sensors ought to be technology. They ought to be under $5, and they ought to be able to actuate on a very elegant, articulate communications platform. But not only show people that the computers are packaged, but it needs to be able to load balance. It's the most expensive part of the power grid system, as you know, is buying spot market and MSPs. And if we can save 70 to 80% of the revenues that go into power, then we can pay for these ubiquitously deployed environment. That's a holy grail. So I guess my question is, knowing that's where we need to get to, we need, I think that there are, right now, I think there are programs and sensors and technologies that exist today, but to deploy it, we need the help from NSA or NSF or EY. We need some help to fund some of these programs and move along more aggressively, and we need to be convening a little bit more on all these efforts. And I wonder how we can do that, because I do think that what you're trying to do is the holy grail. That I think we can do that quicker. So how can we convene that more aggressively?
You know, Chattanooga paid for the business plan to pay back the $300 million investment. It was almost entirely through savings to the electrical system. You know, while we did receive a grant of $100 million to complete our build out, that only sped up the process. I mean, the savings are there from just the electrical system.
Are you guys willing to share that information?
Oh, absolutely, yes. And I mean, I think that is the, you know, the whole question of how do you build these things out, who's going to do it? It's really difficult for a cable or telecom provider to justify that type of an investment. But when you partner with an electrical system, that's where the real savings are. And we are starting the time of day charges for electrical this year. TVA, our provider, is going to that. And that is what EPB says at a minimum that we should be able to save enough energy just from their service area to eliminate the need for half a nuclear plant. That, you know.
We have a comment in the back.
My name is John Horgan. I want to make a comment about the users end of this equation, and a comment that's kind of be framed as a hypothesis that I think has to be worked out. But when you start to have higher speed connectivity, multiple devices and applications and platforms for users to engage with, I think we do start to run into the problem of abundance for users. And I've done research on users for years, and usually about 25 to 30% of any population of users are both engaged and competent in using these new applications. Everybody else is along a range of either lack of skills or indifference to them. So I think something to build into rolling out these new very high-speed networks is research that helps understand how people cope with this abundance, the barriers they use, and use that research as a way to develop toolkits to help users become more comfortable quickly adopting this. And that'll help As you scale these up in specific communities, it can help the case for scaling them up more nationally as the resources are there to do that. So I put that out as part of the research challenge in doing this, which is understanding the behavioral aspect to this as more and more abundance of ICTs come to the people, and welcome any comments or observations on that from the panel.
Right. I think I totally agree with you on the need that users need to understand how to use new applications, new technologies. But I think that new bandwidth in general will probably lead to new applications. So that's probably, the users don't need to know how to use the bandwidth. The applications will come that will use this bandwidth, all this high bandwidth video interactivity, the voice, the video calling capabilities with more fidelity and maybe, I don't know, 3-dimensional calls or whatever, 3-dimensional interactions. But I think you're right about the need for getting users engaged with these new applications. But there will be some more advanced users, others less so, and so that's a problem that we always have to deal with. I agree with that.
Yeah.
Just one comment on the economy of the smart grid meters themselves. When you have a community that builds 170,000. All you need is a few more communities, and you really do have some economy of scale in manufacturing, and that's going to drive the price down to where it becomes a competitive market more than a commodity rather than a specialty.
I just wanted to get back to the comment about user toolkits. I think as part of doing network monitoring and what we're doing in Jeanne, there's this concept of slices. So you have a fairly high definition view into what's happening in the network. And if we can add to the standard stuff that we collect for monitoring the types of things that you'd like to see to characterize users, then that would be some data that would come out of every single prototyping effort that goes over the networking that might help with a first cut at, does it look like this or that network or this or that city or this or that application is more successful in making users comfortable or not. And I know you can't really see what's going on with individual users like that, but it might be kind of like the health applications where we can send off some kind of positive alarm or negative alarm saying, hey, this looks like it's doing really well, this looks like it might need some help, and do something about trying to make the user's transition better. So if you have ideas for a toolkit, let me know.
John, you look like you might have something to say.
I had something to say. John Piha. One issue that was actually one of the core pieces of what we're now calling Ignite in the beginning that we haven't talked about much, and I thought I'd throw out here as a chance to sort of challenge the community about how to do it well, is how to capture what we learn and share it. We're going to learn both from our successes and from things that don't go so well. That could be overcoming technical problems, that could be figuring out what communities need, that could be figuring out how to engage incumbents, all sorts of things. And what we want to prevent is a bunch of projects go off by themselves, learn things, and 3 years later it appears in an obscure journal. We want to get the flow of information going, open ideas on how we do that effectively.
So we've been trying to build and merge communities in Jeanne and doing it by physically getting together, which I realize is very archaic and old-fashioned. But it really does seem to work if people stand in the hallway and drink coffee together or go off and have beer. Are you thinking along those lines, or do you think, no, everything should be video conferenced, or, what are your thoughts?
Cruel, turn around my own question. Personally, I think humans can actually talk to each other. I hear that's a good idea. I also would love to see places that, virtual places, if you like, that lots of information can be captured, whether repositories, wikis, blogs. There's that newfangled internet technology. It's got to be good for something.
Well, what I'm interested in is how do we get the innovators in our respective communities within respective subject matter area experts sharing information with their peers in other communities. So it's not just about us sharing information, it's about how do the people in our communities, how do the doctors, how do the teachers, how do the government officials, how do they share information between the communities? I think that'd be extremely valuable.
Questions? comments? Yep, oh, thanks, Mike.
So I'm kind of struggling with that myself, but I'm thinking about this 170,000 users in other places and all this, and so I think what I feel, and you all correct me if I'm wrong, what's missing here is, of this 170,000 users, 150,000 have a TV in their home, right? And so how can you use, to make the media experience, how can we improve the media experience? Video, as much as we like it or don't like it, is still the killer app, right? Look at backbone traffic, 20% is Netflix these days. And I think what I'm missing a little bit, and I don't know how complicated it is, but we have to get these companies involved. We have to get Amazon, we have to get Netflix, we have to get Google. And Google is apparently involved already in Kansas a little bit to a good extent, but we have to get them involved because I think these are, if you want to have a broad user base, I think these are the first kind of applications where you get a broad user base, because everyone, speaking about myself, a lot of people flip on their TVs at home and watch whatever's on there. So I think that from my point of view might be a good first approach if you really want to have a large user base. And it would be interesting to hear what other people think about that.
Yep.
My name is Graham Richard, and John, thank you for what Chattanooga has done. There are 2,300 municipal electric utilities roughly. In Indiana, there are 60 fiber-to-the-home builds. Only 2 are done by municipal electric utilities, very, very small. The question is, how do we get your peers to better understand the Chattanooga story, the Lafayette, Louisiana story, the Auburn, Indiana story? What can move us, and what would you recommend, as a leader in Chattanooga with a history of public service, what works? We had another session today. I comment that in the Cleveland area, there are over 50 local governments in this immediate Cuyahoga County area. Not one of them has a CIO, and none of them are engaging with a very effective organization with leadership from CASE in the behavior that would lead them to understand that a gigabit nation is critical for job retention, economic security, healthcare, all the things that we all believe in here. And I think that, to me, so you've done it. What can you recommend? How do we move that needle?
Well, I think that we have to prove that it works. We have the EPB, the leadership there, believes, and they all come from an electrical utility background, they believe they're going to save enough money to pay for this. For example, we have $10 million a year in electricity stolen, is the estimate. You get these smart meters, that goes away. It can't happen. I mean, that's a huge number. But many utilities just don't think about that. I think, and it works in the other applications too. We need to get the applications, y'all need to come up with them, so that people realize why they need the gigabit. And we all in this room know that, but people sitting at their homes don't. So we need these great demonstration projects so everybody's going to know. A lot of people aren't just willing to go make this kind of investment based on projections. We were, and we're convinced it's going to pay off, and really believe it will. And let's not make everybody else wait until we've got several years of proving that.
Misha.
One of the interesting things that I've learned about energy conservation on the part of homeowners is that saving money isn't what gets them motivated. It's peer pressure. And I'm kind of curious what you're doing in Chattanooga to create that peer pressure.
That is something that's being talked about a lot. We have weekly meetings with about 15 to 20 people, and they're always different people, just to make them aware of different community leaders, aware of what system is in place and is being put in place. And, you know, some people have talked about having neighborhood Facebook pages. You know, we are going to be very careful about sharing privacy. You know, we're not going to give out information. But of course, people, if they want to with their neighbors, they can share it. And there are efforts underway like that to, you know, so that is something being thought of. You're exactly right. Although we do think that the money will matter as electricity gets more expensive, because it is going to get more expensive.
Power companies, it's a zero-sum game. You're going to get at least as much money.
You're right, and you know, that's where we think we're fortunate that our utility is municipally owned.
Yeah, one last question.
You talked about having thousands of applications on the Ignite, I guess, application bazaar. And you talked about how to evangelize essentially the story of Jeanne and the success in Chattanooga and building out fiber. Like, are there any, and I guess this is a question for you, Heidi, are there any plans for like a casual API to use Jeanne? So maybe you can target not people who are building out large infrastructure projects or large research projects, but maybe the casual developer, like a startup in California or an undergraduate looking to do a project in their senior year.
Right.
You know, if you want to engage someone, you want to get someone excited about this, why not give them the tools to do it? Is there any plan for like, you know, like a simple API?
Yeah, so the way we do it in Jeanne, we have a Jeanne API for dealing with the resources and the slices, and we have a couple of different projects that are working on how to either make that thing accessible via a Java interface that's easy for students to deal with. So the NetServe project, for example, which is one that we were discussing before, actually lets you not have to worry about the Jeanne underneath, but run some kind of say a content distribution network or something like that using the NetServe part that goes over it. There's also some people working on tools that are specifically aimed at students and undergraduates, not even graduate students. So, you know, maybe not as casual as high school people sitting around in their homes, although, you know, the right motivated one can handle that too. The Gush project, if you take a look at that, was targeted at that from the beginning, and they've been incredibly successful at using Jeanne, even though they've always tried to, you know, keep that kind of user at the top of their list of what they're trying to do. So I'd say I don't think Jeanne by itself can do it, but I think Jeanne with the right partners who are coming in and building the tools or running services that are aimed at those kind of end users is definitely the right combination.
Okay, well, we've got just a couple more minutes before the plenary, and I think you know, OSTP and NSF have been incredibly helpful and supportive in this, in their roles of conveners, of hoping that they maybe can ask for proposals of how groups can work together and so forth. But I'm sure there's a lot of smart people in the audience that have ideas of, well, you should just do X or you should just do Y to make this all easier. Does anyone actually have any of those? Maybe we don't actually have them at the moment, but you know, how can we make it easier for these partnerships to form? How can we make it easier for this all to happen? Any good ideas? Or should we just plow through?
Can I comment on that also? So I you know, most of the Jeanne workshops, and I think even the meeting here, I feel that, you know, networking researchers and infrastructure builders meet, and I don't know if there is an easy way to do this, but you know, the presentations we saw yesterday, there was all the doctors, dancers, the very diverse community, and I wonder if it's even feasible to have a workshop where they basically come and see what we have. And I don't know how you do that, because you can't potentially, I mean, you can send out hundreds of invites and they may not even realize what this is, but the word has to get out that there is this very high bandwidth capability. What can you do with this? And a lot of them have needs and requirements which maybe they can bring to us. Idea. But I don't, yeah.
You know, in building up John's comment, you know, how do we get social scientists engaged? How do we get, you know, the different subject matter experts engaged and have an even bigger tent in that kind of way? But, you know, more specifically, you know, if we're asking what's going to help us be able to pull together teams, in particular teams to around particular Jeanne pilot projects. Well, just on the most basic thing, as soon as we can get some more clarity of what the grant program actually looks like, so we know what we're building towards, that would be extremely helpful, because then we can start framing out, so what's the scope of the project that we can actually chew on, take a bite off of.
Casey?
Just looking at the many successful experiments and demos that have been done through the GigU program, I see the system engineers that help to facilitate these specific projects is very helpful. So probably that's already in your mind, but if that's not, then for USIgnite projects, if there's a possibility to have, possibly GPO is a good entity, and assign a certain dedicated effort to help coordinating, that would be useful. And the other aspect is probably before executing that, informing the teams, would it be possible that there's some entity help collecting, for example, city interest. So there are many infrastructure providers interested in providing these, and then there are these application builders that are doing that. And we talked about scale up. We certainly can go out individually and try to talk to each cities individually, but if there's one portal that we can say, if we do this, then what are all the cities interested in using that?
Good idea. Yeah.
Just to follow up on your question about undergrads, it was in the video last night for Chattanooga, but Lanthos, our group, we're doing a summer program and we're inviting undergrads to come to Chattanooga, and it's almost like an X prize for the gig, figure out what to do with it, kind of trying to get some of the younger people, the 18-year-olds, the 22-year-olds, that generation in a room for the summer to look at. We've all got a lot of good ideas about building and everything, but the applications I think are really going to come from the younger crowd. So I extend an invitation to anybody who wants to know more about it to reach out to us, to come to Chattanooga, to come for the summer, or whatever. It's a really open program that we're just trying to reach out. And any help we can get, any cool toys that want to be thrown in the mix for the summer, that's really kind of the attractive part of what we've been talking to college kids is, oh wow, I can play with that, I've heard about it, but I've never seen it. So we really try to put that summer program together for next year, and any help is obviously appreciated.
Yes, sir.
One other thing that could be helpful is kind of dovetail with what someone spoke about, is having a conference or some type of event where we showcase the apps, not necessarily for the general public, but for private and for VC firms to come in and kind of, as they wander through as the audience, they will either gravitate to someone, and if you're set up and a large crowd comes through and nobody comes to you and stops at your table, you can pretty much bet that you're not going to go anywhere. So something like that.
We do something like that in Jeanne 3 times a year, and it turns out it's everybody's favorite part of what's going on, right? People love to ramp up and show off their stuff. Right. Yeah, very valuable.
Look, this is a passion to us, obviously. Utopia, we want apps. But the biggest #1 problem we have here is chicken and egg. As we talk about all the smart people in this room, and we talk about developing apps, but until we have an addressable market that works, if we have an addressable market that works, the free market is going to drive that. So the conversations I hear very little of is how to combine an addressable market. And Chattanooga, Utopia with its 180, Chattanooga with its, and Lafayette with its 60,000, all those should be right now. You talk about these spots, but we should be combined together and providing an open access capability so that these apps will naturally flow. It's the same as electricity. You know, when you had electrical addressable markets, and they came up with dishwashers. You know, some guy came around with a silver toaster. We have very little. We have a lot of conversations around that, but very little conversation around the addressable market. And if we continue to meet, and these are great meetings, and I really appreciate it, but if we continue to meet, I agree with John. These would be ongoing dialogues, and we need to start using technology that would help. So I'd be interested in finding out how we can start getting that addressable market quicker. And there's some conversations around that.
web didn't come from a room like this, and neither did Bitcoin or Skype or anything, right? We built a foundation, and people figured out how to use it. We got to get the people on board to figure out how to use it. We got to give them access.
Yep.
Just on that same vein of bringing social science presence here, I think we could do well by really reaching out to some of the business schools. For example, right across the street here, the Weatherford School has a very strong emphasis on organizational systems, social system design, sustainability practices. You know, a lot of the social dimension that really runs in parallel to the systems thinking that is applied here in the apps. And I think you know, when we are building our teams, that's something to really consider, is bringing in that diversity coming from the organizational systems, social science perspective. And I think the business schools are a real incubator of that.
It's a really good idea. Okay, maybe the last comment.
I'm working on a VTOP initiative in Maryland where we're interconnecting about 10 or 15 individual island local government networks into one that goes across the entire state. At the end of the day, it'll be about 4,200 miles. We're directly connecting 1,006 anchor institutions with the VTOP money, but there's quite a few more on the network existing that will all be interconnected at the end of the day. And to John's point, I think one way to sort of create a tipping point across the country is to use the anchor institutions to showcase some of these, highlight the libraries, to use them as a model, to showcase to the public some of these apps and what you can do. You know, go to where you use these anchor institutions in some of these VTOP projects where you have open access requirements to showcase some of these to create that tipping point. But one thing that I think would be helpful for you all, you asked to create these partnerships, is to put together a database of networks that would be available and amenable to these types of interconnections. Because I think at the end of the day, we can probably find a pathway that would connect all of them together. So to create just a listing of who those contacts are and where the networks are and what resources we can utilize, and I would open that up to the federal government as well, to say that there may be resources that the federal government has with the transportation fiber that we can tap into to make that accomplishment.
Just a question. Is there some well-known community of library app developers or something? You know, this is far from anything I know about. Is there some obvious place you can go to get great applications, or does this have to be improvised? I mean, well.
I mean, I think it's sort of a challenge to the community is what we're coming up with here as part of Ignite, is to develop some of these applications that can be used in the institution level and showcase. But I think part of it is understanding where the networks are that you can use these applications and knowing what the platform is, the marketplace.
The Internet 2 K20 initiative, you know, works closely with the members, which are a lot of regionals, a lot of school districts, and a lot of libraries, and they try to pull together content. A lot of them are coming out of museums around the country and then available to different members of the K20 initiative to tap in. But there's no real true application, it's more content right now. But tying into that organization to help link up to some of the users of that.
Okay, well, if I would just throw in one plug for performing arts organizations.
One plug.
I mean, think about the demos, the things that people really kind of got hooked on. When we start talking about trying to sell people on what these capabilities are, a little bit of showbiz goes a long ways, quite honestly. And I think it's a great way to get people that might not normally be attracted to some of the more academic, scientific, what have you, types of approaches. It's a great way to get them involved.
Yeah, that was actually fabulous. Especially the students last night were just spot on. Okay, we better wrap it up. Thank you all very much. And we're going right into the plenary. I am going to be off to the meeting.
Okay.
I am very impressed.
Well, thanks. We're done for things.
We'll do everything.
Okay, I know. Yeah, right.